All right, welcome back to the bench. We are very excited for this show. This is our summer ending show where we're just going to talk about the summer, some of the topics and areas that we touched on with our guests. We are very excited to have Justin with us. He is the man behind the scenes, but he is part of that brain trust that wanted to get this started and wanted to get it off the ground, and he's been organizing us from behind the scenes. So we obviously appreciate that. But let me throw it to you, Justin. Like, being kind of behind the scenes and seeing it, what are your thoughts on this summer? What are some highlights that you want to touch on and maybe give us some perspective?
First of all, it's great to finally be on. I mean, we've done a bunch of pre-shows and everything. I think this kind of goes back to when you and I talked right when the world shut down, when things changed in March. You and I got together and we filmed something just because we both felt the need to say some things. And that, I think, was really a catalyst for, okay, we have some ideas that we need to share. And where things have been taken away from us as far as our ability to go to the Final Four. This is where I always see you guys, is we see each other at the Final Four, or when you guys come to Vegas, obviously. But it really kind of, when you and I had that discussion mid-March, it was really a catalyst for, okay, we can't just not see each other for 2 years. And we have lots of things to say. We have lots of questions to ask. And Brian, I give you a ton of credit for really pushing this. So I was thrilled that it got started. And I think we're going to talk here a little bit about kind of the guest list. It's fantastic, the number of people the different perspectives that we got to hear from, the experts we got to talk to, and it became so much more than we could have ever got from a Final Four. So, that's kind of at the high level where I'm thrilled with what we've been able to do.
Well, and I think that goes to, you mentioned the list, right? And I think it was something that we knew, or we saw a lot of these things happening. A lot of the podcasts starting up, a lot of these conversations starting, and we are very mindful of what we wanted to do, the conversations we wanted to have. So Jesse, I'm going to throw it to you. When we did kick this off, what was it like from a perspective of obviously being a co-host, but then also being able to attract some of the conversations that we have had over the past summer?
Well, the first part as a co-host is I can't think of a group of guys that we've been around together. I know one of our chats that we had offline was a photo of like an OG photo of years back, and so can't think of a group of guys I wouldn't want to do this with. And I think what's really resonated with people that have given us feedback is that people can see that relational part. And that really has been the catalyst kind of every conversation we've gone into, and I think that allowed us to seamlessly with passion and intention, talk to people about topics that interest us but yet highlight their stories with that. And then when the time called for us to do something live and in real time, we were able to pivot to that just as seamlessly, and it felt the same, and it felt intentional, and it felt transformational. And those were big words that we were using from the get-go. And I think, credit to the group here, and then also to just us hearing what people were saying and how we were impacting, and just continue to dive down and drill down more into that, And Tony, I know as you kind of, you really sort of, you really were really diligent and intentional with some of those live shows. And I think that your energy through some of those really navigated that. But maybe talk about, from that perspective of that intentionality that you had there, coming off of some of the great stuff that we had to start with Rachel and Betsy, and some of those conversations. They almost laid the framework and the foundation for us to be able to do those live shows in a way that I think was respectful and tactful. So maybe dive into that a little bit more, in that drawing from those first couple shows.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I was just making some notes kind of through looking at our guest list and talking about some of the folks that we did. And there's a lot of ties and a lot of, I guess, cyclical type pieces that come with it. You know, we started with Rachel and we talked about the WNBA and kind of how the pandemic was, you know, affecting pro basketball, how it was affecting recruiting, how it was affecting a lot of other issues. And we just kind of turned that through and started to ask questions and think thoughts about transformational leadership and communication and where that all came together. And as you look at all of those things, and then we pushed into some of the other current things going on with the racial issues and social injustice and so many of the things going on in our daily lives, where then we were able to kind of pull that communication piece back in, and then also pivot to how great the WNBA and NBA have been in spearheading the conversation nationally. And we also, you know, we're able to slide over to Anwar McQueen and his deal with We Are Team Inc. and trying to provide opportunities for young people of color and also women in these pro sports. So I think a lot of the pieces that we hit on as the year went on kind of bounced off of each other in the sense of the communication and trying to transform and change, you know, maybe some things that weren't as good into things that could be better. And I know maybe that was our aim at the beginning of this. How could we help ourselves be better, but also help others be better in the same way? You know, and I think the way we brought guests in and the communication we had, as well as some of the, you know, the live Instagram stuff we did, we had great conversations. You know, I know Gavin's conversation with Emily Potter was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a fun deal. I enjoyed not only being with you guys, you know, instead of meeting up at the Final Four out on the road, we got to meet weekly. And I had something to look forward to in this beginning of this stay-at-home order. You know, it was like couldn't go to the office, couldn't do anything. So it's like, hey, we had our From the Bench show that I really took a lot out of. A lot of our guests I knew, and a lot of them I didn't. So getting to hear from the younger generation, their perspective, their drive, their just wanting to be able to do the job in our profession at the best they could. You know, that was very insightful. One of my favorite shows was when we did pivot a little and we directed more to the social injustices going on, what's going on today in our world. And, you know, even though I wasn't on the show as an active participant, me and my wife, Karen, we sat here and we watched Rusty, Ayana, Derek, Anthony, Tony, you, and Brian. Still to this day, that was a very impactful show for me. And I got a lot out of it just by opening up my 2 ears. And that's the thing, you know, we're not going to tell people how to do things, but I think from each of our unique perspectives, we give a lot of our audiences just different viewpoints and kind of like stories that got us to where we are. And then our guests did a phenomenal job of not just informing them, but also informing us on certain issues, certain deals, certain topics that are still prevalent in our profession. And even more so with mental health awareness. I feel like I've grown a lot from this show. So, you know, thank you guys for including me. But I definitely want to keep this thing going because I feel like we can reach a lot more in the future.
Awesome. I think, you know, fantastic guest list, and credit to everyone who joined the show. It's been fantastic. Question I have for you guys, kind of taking stock of where we've been and where we are right now. You know, things have changed since March in a million different ways, in a million different directions. Would love to hear from you guys, just kind of how you guys doing? How are we holding up? You know, I mean, Gavin, I saw you were the last one of the group that I saw. I saw you Pac-12 tournament right before things shut down. You and I were in a looking back in a very crowded gymnasium or a pretty big gym full of people, you and I talked quite a bit right when things shut down about, all right, how's everybody in your family feeling? Everybody in my family's good. And then, we're months into it now. We're approaching, basketball season appears to be, in front of us. Back to you, Gavin, real quick. How have the last couple months been for you as that has transitioned back to what might be, I hate the term new normal, but whatever's in front of us?
Yeah, at first I thought, it was going to take until the end of the summer. I knew back in March and April that there was no way we were going to go out recruiting, regardless if tournaments were going to be held. I didn't feel the universities nor the NCAA would just allow coaches to kind of go out and actively participate in these type of settings. And then also, we have our boy Brian here who informed us quite a bit with some real life information that really kind of helped me and my family prepare. I mean, I still call Brian asking about whether or not we should send our children to in-person classes or not. But, fast forward now, I honestly thought things would be a little better off. And I'm kind of disappointed it's not. And we are in the stage of, the calendar year that we usually have things planned out all the way till March 2021. And that's no longer the case. I am hearing a bunch of rumors, a bunch of articles being released via Twitter about basketball taking place in November. I hear basketball postponed to a month. Utah in the Pac-12, they came out, and I don't know if it was a knee-jerk reaction or not, but they said nothing until 2021. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens, in the next couple of weeks when the NCAA makes a decision on women's basketball and their championships? So right now it's kind of the wait and see approach, but what better profession to do it? I mean, we make adjustments in timeouts, in between quarters, at halftime. So, I mean, it's a game of adjustments, and kind of like I'm just adjusting at this point. What about you, Brian?
So Brian's on mute right now. So so Brian, one of the things that Gavin just mentioned and that you and I talked about early in March is the importance of being in the moment. Like Gavin said, we don't know what the next couple months, weeks are going to be, and there's no use guessing. The importance of being in the situation that you're in right now and seeing what is real.
I think this is our lens is basketball, right? Our lens is a calendar that we've been married to since the beginning. And, September 1 is right around the corner, and it's just, this is a pandemic for a reason. It's a virus that we are still learning about. Very personal. It hit my family. It hit Michelle's family first. Her uncle was literally on a ventilator for 30 some odd days. He was in the hospital for 40 of them. My grandmother now has it. She's fine. She's breathing healthy. We're watching the fever come and go. So when you talk about like being in the moment, my moment right now is keeping my family healthy, ensuring that no matter what happens in terms of the noise, which whatever we're hearing on television from our politicians, whatnot, that we treat this exactly what it is, which is a virus. I married up per se, to a wife who is an epidemiologist. This is what she does. Who would have known that our worlds would have collided? Like we weren't thinking that it would ever collide, but I remember being at the Pac-12 tournament and they're wiping down the rails. And that was very early in this whole thing. And then when the Ivy League mentioned or came out with their statement, it changed everything. And so I would just, for us, it's, when is the vaccine going to come out? Who's going to go all into the vaccine? This is none of that's basketball related. It's strictly all science, and whatever that number is that they're going to release to the public, who are they targeting? What areas are they targeting? And it's just, there's a strategy to that. And basketball, sports, what we get to do is just kind of, it's a different lane, you know, and we're reacting to that lane. So it hit home for us a little bit different, obviously, but I mean, I think that's what we have to do. We have to, I mean, for me, I have to advocate for, you know, my wife's uncle, my grandmother, my aunt, my cousin, her son who has it, friends that have it now, friends, fathers who have passed away from having it. Not so much not that they passed from COVID, but they passed from an underlying condition. So we got to take care of our people. And I think in getting back to the show, I mean, we were able to talk to that. You know, Rachel was very, very, very honest with where she thought about the virus and what she thought about the virus, how it was going to affect recruiting, the WNBA at the time. We had her back to touch on the pulse of how the WNBA reacted and then is standing to protect their players and coaches. So, I mean, that I'm sorry, that's long-winded, but it hit personal just simply because of who it hit for me. But, you know, and I'll toss it down the coast to Jesse. I mean, we're in California. You know, it hit our school differently. It hit our lives differently. And, you know, so perspective-wise, being in the now, how are you doing?
Well, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. And I think that's what always has resonated with people in the feedback is, and you shouldn't have to apologize for your comments there, because I think that's exactly the point. And that's exactly why we chose to do the show in the format and let storytelling and personal experience really guide the theme. And you know, and I think something as you were thought you were going to go there, but when Dr. Julie Shaw, you know, was on our show and talked about the mental health aspect, about real conversations with the topic of death, which is something important to her and personal to her, and to hear that story really resonated with me. And what that did, and it really for me was resonated how it is about the now. It is about checking on your people, and then bringing it back to the basketball part is not only our own, Brian, you talked about your own family tree people, but you've got your extended family, a locker room of, you know, 12 to 15 daughters that you also got to check on. And we've had two massive topics over the last few months where they're two totally different things, but they're equally as important, where we need to make sure we're doubling down on checking on our people. And I think, you know, Tony, you sent something earlier offline about a topic, and it's probably not appropriate for today's show, but I think what happens, we're seeing people that are either genuinely doubling down on people or not. And if you're not that person, I think that this is not the profession that you probably need to be mindful of who you're impacting and how you're impacting people. So, you know, when we talked about, you know, the intentionality of our guests, you know, I think about Bradley up at Pacific and Danielle when they're on Danny rather, when they were on the show together. And I thought that was such great perspective and healthy and much needed. And the intentionality that they go with their programs and with their athletes and with topics, I thought that was really, really important, you know? And so Tony, I know that, you know, I think that's been a big theme, because your perspective has been a little bit different, coming from the Northeast, coming from the things that you've been doing on and off the court, you know, and I just, you know, talk maybe on that a little bit more from that perspective of some of that, you know, ability to use this format to just talk about how you can, you know, how can we make sure we're taking care of not only the family tree, like Brian mentioned, but then the extended one that we have, that we are all each responsible for? Sure.
I mean, well, one thing I want to say right off the top is that, Brian, you absolutely married up. So that's not even a question. I was there, folks. So yeah, he did. So I guess when we're talking about all of these topics, I think you're starting to see some of the topics that we talked about them play out in real time. And I think part of it is from the ability of, again, the WNBA, the NBA, and lots of people around the world, especially people of color that are out there saying, this is my truth. Like, this is what really happens. This is what we see every day. This is what I see every day. And you're starting to see that more and more on college campuses with teams. They're not afraid to speak up and to, and in defense of themselves, really. I think there's through the years, there's always been kind of this culture of, even if something feels right with me, I don't want to really say anything because I don't want to rock the boat. And I think, you're starting to get a little bit more conversation about some things that need to be talked about. And I know it goes back to kind of what Dr. Scott Morton was talking about when she was saying, coaches always hear him talk about buy-in, but she was talking more about own in. Communicate with your players and put yourself in a position where you can, actually get them to own into the situation because they're involved in the decision-making process. They're involved in what happens. And I think you saw a perfect example of that at the pro level of what the NBA guys just did. They said, look,
100%.
We're not playing unless you open up your arenas for voting. And I think that's the power that athletics and sport has in our country, which is awesome. And it's so cool that it's being used for a bigger purpose. And I don't think that doesn't go unnoticed. When your heroes are Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe and LeBron James and Donovan Mitchell and, go sport to sport for the Mets, Dom Smith was unbelievable in how he spoke, after Jacob Blake's shooting. That there's a ton of great and intelligent and determined people that are in these sports that are now using their voice. And I think all of that's going to, trickle down to our athletes. And I think at this point, and again, the last 2 years, I haven't been a college basketball coach. And, I want to get back in because I see all these wonderful and these cool things that are happening. And I want to be part of that. I want to be part of helping these student athletes find their voice and being able to express themselves as eloquently as they have and to speak out about things that are, natural for them to speak out about because they affect them as human beings, not as a soccer player, as a volleyball player, as a basketball player, as a human. And I think, that, whether it's the pandemic, finally the huge push to, push for equality in this country that's getting the attention it deserves. And even, the election going forward, I think there's so much out there that our student athletes can speak on because they do have a platform. People do know who they are and they recognize. And I'm hoping that universities and colleges throughout the country are starting to say, hey, guys, please go ahead and do this. Show your voice. Speak your truth. Talk about what's going on with you. And I think there has been more of a push for that, which I think in the long-term health mentally of all these athletes and everybody in general, that a conversation is going to be had. That conversations are being had a lot all over the country is making a big difference in the lives of these kids and the lives of every person in the country.
And I think you said, I just want to interject real quick, but I know this was a few years ago, but when a mainstream media person tells an athlete, LeBron James, to shut up and dribble, I think right now that whole statement's being thrown right back into the face of mainstream middle America. It's like, whoa. Not only through pro sports with how it's handled the pandemic, pro sports, how it's handling these social injustice topics, it is resonating now and it's empowering. And it's almost like a different thing where we're repeating where young people are rising up on these topics, but yet now it's taking it all the way into people that have even more massive platforms because of sport. And I just think that's really, really, really brilliant. Justin, you've done a couple things where I know you've talked about some of that voting piece, in your community, and I'm a big proponent of that community thing and things that are happening and being mindful and local. I know it's some things we've talked about with voting and stuff. And I know, Brian, I think you guys have done maybe some stuff with your team. I don't know if Gab, you have or not. Maybe you could speak on that again. But maybe Justin, talk a little bit about that piece, I know we've touched on it briefly, but, some things that maybe you're seeing in the marketplace from the perspective and the lens that you have.
So the point that Tony made about, and Jesse, you as well, the young people having a voice. You know, and as, you know, a father to a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, you know, the future is theirs. It's right there in front of them. You know, I make sure that my voice is heard, and I really, you know, hope that we as a group, and then us as a coaching community, can continue to encourage those young voices to not just be on social media, but get to the polls. There are a number of different, I guess, initiatives at this point to get, you know, student athletes to the polls, to get college kids to the polls. I know that we kind of talked about, you know, what are some of the steps to do this? There's a education that needs to happen on, you know, people can pay attention to who's running for president, but who's in your backyard? Who is your city commissioner? Who is your state legislator? These are
who's your police chief? Who's your police chief?
Absolutely. Yes. And that those are your voice, your vote is extremely powerful up and down that ballot. And, you know, and I think that's something that I want to continue to talk about. I think that's something that is going to be extremely important in not just up until November, but into the next forever. I mean, it's a great democracy if you can keep it. And that's everybody not just letting other people determine things, but get out there and make your voice heard, and make your voice heard at the ballot box.
Yeah. Gavin, how are you guys approaching that with your group? I know you've had your kids back on campus now for a little, 2 or 3 weeks at least now.
Yeah, we're fortunate here at the University of Utah. We have a working group, the Ute Academy, which they're very hands-on. They actually had football team had just last week a drive to register everybody on their team, but they did it in the Huntsman Center, where any other athlete who was not registered to vote was able to come through and do that. So they've done a tremendous job with our athletic department. And for us, our roster is a little unique too. We have 5 kids from the U.S. We have 8 kids from all over the world, but the message is still the same. You still need to get out and vote. There's a worldwide pandemic, not just with COVID, but with the social injustices and inequalities going around worldwide. So that's where we have to take time and make sure we inform them, we educate them on, okay, well, if you're not registered to vote, you're going to have to get online, and let's look at those steps in order to do so. But, to Tony, your point, Justin, your point, the platform is there for our student athletes. I think as coaches, we need to recognize that. We always preach like, hey, you come to our program, you'll graduate here and you'll be able to be ready for the real world. Okay. What does that look like in your 4 years? It is not just let's play game. It's not about the wins and losses. Yes, people lose their jobs based on wins and losses. But if you've been paying attention in the media, you also realize that people lose their jobs for just being insensitive to some of the needs of our student athletes. And the thing catches like wildfire. So you can either sit on the sideline and let that happen to you, or you can be all in and the wins and losses happen in life, not also just in between the lines. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox and send it to you, Brian.
No, I think this is all important, right? Because I think we've entered a generational push that this generation gets to stand on. And, I've often said, when an athlete walks into a lobby or a restaurant, people notice, right? People notice them. If the random CEO of that city walks into that same restaurant or lobby, maybe, right? But if that local politician, like the local politician walks in, no one knows him, and I think what you get to watch now is, athletes holding their voice. And I credit the NBA and the WNBA from the start. Their ownership is behind their athletes. They seem to be one and the same, and using the leverage to now go get the corporate sponsorships in the same room. And Tony touched on this, where now they're using their leverage. We are not going to play and finish the season until these three things happen. That is leverage. That is allowing this generation to take hold. And often we don't think about like LeBron James being this leader of this generation. We don't look at those athletes that way, but we should, because they have their microphone, they're on TV all the time, and now they're able to use their voice after every game and make sure that we are on the same talking point and the messaging is the same, which is social injustice is what our focus is on, and that is why we are continuing to play. And
to elaborate on that a little bit, the WNBA and the NBA players, and even to lesser extent, I think the soccer players in the MLS and some of the other leagues joined in, that was not approved by their union. They did that on their own. Like, they very well could have been punished. There could have been a lot of retribution that went with that, but there was nothing, because the cause was bigger than the issue. And so it wasn't an athlete thing. It was a human being thing. And I think that gets lost sometimes, that, it's as if, you go back to the strikes that were happening during the Great Depression when wages were so low, and, or right before World War II. And, they were strikes. Like, this was for a bigger issue. It didn't have anything to do with the sport or the game. It had everything to do with the country and the world that we live in. And I think that's the idea behind everything. And I know that's been the call recently. It's like, okay, all these pro teams are opening up their venues for voting. How come universities haven't followed through?
I just wonder, what would have happened, to go back to your point about the Milwaukee Bucks, what would have happened if Colin Kaepernick did not happen?
Right.
The whole thing didn't happen, right? Where the owners and the commissioner of the NFL didn't listen from the start and have that. So it's,
as I'm wearing my jersey and the shield and all that is on there, yeah. Is there any thought that there wasn't collusion to keep this guy out of the league? I mean, at this point now, like, I'm saying this for me personally, I'm not speaking for anyone else on here, but when they're now saying, oh, we're sorry, what exactly are you sorry for? Not allowing him to be signed by any teams? Is that what you're sorry for? So it's an interesting thought. You're sorry for not listening, but, there's the paradigm has shifted, right? He's not the bad guy anymore. Everybody else that doesn't want to push for this change is now the bad guy. In that specific
And I think
time.
maybe that's the art of where sport has maybe, say, trumped, say, the Hollywood landscape. At the beginning of all this, you had all these actors and stuff coming out and making da-da-da. And it just, to me anyway, again, I'll speak like Tony for myself, it just felt, like we were actors on a stage, where I think as athletes have come forward and resonated with people in a way, because it's not been about them. It's been about something that's way bigger than them. And I think that has really resonated. And I think that's been such a great example to our young people that we coach. And I want to pivot on that note, because that's been part of our theme with our show, is how we've had those sort of wanting our group think, the five of us and the years that we have under our belt, to be able to mentor to some young people. And the three that, with Connor and Ashton, and then really probably, and I don't know, Gav, comment on this too. I know that Kira Carter, the new head coach that we got to interview, was just tremendous. What was your takeaway, that maybe just that conversation that we had with her, and just, continuing to follow her on social media after that, and just going, man, that how, we have knucklehead things going on with coaches and their teams, and yet I'm so refreshed and energized by someone like Kira, who's going to take over a program. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was very impressed, not only with her, with Ashton, Connor. They're just, they're polished, and yet they know what they want, all right? So they have a destination. That's where they want to get to. They're not afraid to roll up their sleeves and ask, be creative, and, think outside the box in terms of creating groups to discuss things. And in regards to Kira, she just is, her journey in and of itself made her who she is right now. And her future is bright because she's going to be able to walk alongside anyone, carry a conversation with anybody, and also lead these young women, whether it's out of high school, out of junior college, transferring from another D1 university. I mean, she's been through it. She can speak on it through her own experiences, learn from either her mistakes or other people's mistakes. And that's kind of what I love about what we do is, I don't always learn from the most successful person in the room. I like learning from some people's mistakes, and it doesn't have to be a drastic, huge mistake. It can be a small one, but I'm just always looking for those type of opportunities. But the younger generation of coaches that we have talked to on this show are they're very impressive. And I wish I had this when I was, in my early 20s trying to break in to the industry. I didn't have that, but, that's why I love what we're doing. And, whoever wants to kind of take from the lessons of what we've gone through and how we've done it, great. But go ahead, Jesse.
Go ahead. No, what you just said really resonated. It's like, I think sometimes so many people, like you mentioned back when we were starting out, it was like, no one was doing what we're doing to just share. Here's the information. This is what we learned. This is our story. We're going to share other stories. Here's what we went through. Here's the information, and I think a lot of times there's the other mentality of like, well, no. I mean, unless you ask me, I'm not going to give it, and I think that really resonates. And, I sort of off topic, I heard Kevin Hart talking on that very topic, just in the genre that he's in, and he's like, I'm just out here sharing information and y'all just do whatever you want with it. And that really resonated. And it just, what you just said reminded me of that story, Brian, talk about maybe the early conversation. Justin mentioned it early, we sat around and, we were supposed to be doing this, what we always do, but just, launch us into where we're going, what's the next, we talked about how we're doing. We talked about, the things that were highlights for us. What's our next? What's this group's next? What is our vision?
Well, I mean, again, this is kind of our thing, right? This is our vehicle, this is our lane to be able to narrate where we feel focus and attention should go. I mean, in talking with all of us offline, whether it's separately or together, it was always to kind of control what narrative. I mean, we know people out there that look the part, but they're empty shells. They are, and head coaches, assistants, all levels, that they're not doing what is important to us, which is invest in young women so that they can be positive stewards of their community. And whether they become pros or not, that's a sidebar. That's a result of. And I think that is a huge piece that we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing people to tell their stories so that they can be understood, that they can, and I'm going to say that, Tony's too good to be out of the game. And there are people who take his spot just by the look. And they're just empty. And I think we have to have a vehicle that people can share their stories. I mean, like, right, Raina came on from a player's perspective, allowing us to get better as coaches simply by sharing what she went through. And she went through a couple staffs, and then she, and so there's a different perspective there. And I think that's part of the conversation that we want to keep having. And Justin, I'll throw it to you in terms of just, the types of conversations we want to have, because what we started is just, we're just cultivating the conversation that's happening at a national level. So many of the conversations we've had, we're going to continue, but where do you want to see the narrative and the conversation going as it relates to potentially having a season and a season that we don't know of yet?
I think we just need to continue to be true to some of the things that we've talked about, being in the moment, and being aware of what's going on. I think that has served us extremely well. And think about the conversations that we've had covering mental health, covering Black Lives Matter, racial injustice. Just think about, and it was a product of us being in the moment and not saying, well, hey, when are we going to talk about zone offense? I mean, when's the X's and O's coming up? So I do think that at the core, we need to continue to be present. We need to continue to see what the conversation is. And for me personally, and I think you guys all know this from before I got out of coaching, my motivation's always been to help coaches. It's always been to, and it's been really basic at that. And, from girls softball to, helping guys in the NBA, it's the helping coaches be more productive, and not just productive, but better at their craft. And we have really found, I think, an interesting place on helping coaches develop personally. And I think that has been a product of us just being aware of what the conversation is, us being active in learning as much as we can. And this might be another show, but I am continually looking back at where I was when I started coaching, and the things I would do differently, or the things I didn't know. And I think for us to be a resource for some coaches who don't know what they don't know is extremely important. And, I think, Gavin, you and I kind of started in the same place in the same area. Looking back on what we didn't know, and where we are now, we have such a wealth of experience to share.
Absolutely. I still remember meeting you one of the first few times when I was at University of Idaho. And, to your point, I'm just going to kind of, confirm what he just said. Justin was trying to help us with scouting reports. Do you guys use this program? What do you guys do for scouting reports? Here we are competing in the, at the time it wasn't the same conference, but, we compete for recruits. We compete just to win games. And here he is going out of his way to try to make our lives easier. I still remember this to this day, that experience. And like, oh my goodness. But yes, we've come a long way. We've all had, a lot of years in our journey. And I'll be the first to say I am not the same coach I am now than I was back then. And it's because of being able to grow, learn, not only from the bosses that you work for, but the players you interact with and come across, and even the other assistant coaches. I think I could list every single one. And sometimes I learn from them because of the bad. And most of the time I learn because of the good. And then also, just with what we do and having a circle of friends like you guys, and there are a few more others that I know we all have, but it's, the group that we kind of attract to each other. But it's just good people. And when you strip everything away at the end of the day, if you're a good person, you're good people, you're going to get good results in the long run. And for me, results are getting that invitation for a wedding, getting a birth announcement, those type of things. Back then, Justin, I didn't care about those. I'd be straight up honest. I cared about wins and losses. I want to get a ring. I want to cut down a net. I want to prepare myself for the next head coaching job. Yeah, no.
Well, and on top of that, the things that I started thinking about is what have I learned from, and very relevant to today, what have I learned from the players that I recruited that were different than me, that came from different backgrounds from me? And I just look back at how ignorant I was 15 years ago. And I was a high school coach before I was at Montana State. And just looking back at that experience, like how blind I was to the reality. And, it's sometimes overwhelming to think about how far behind I was, but then also I take, a little bit, like, I feel like I've come a long ways too. And I really appreciate having you guys around here to help, express some of those things that we've all learned.
And I would agree with you guys on that. I mean, we are without question in the people business, and and our young people are kind of our vehicle for our personal success and even for their success. I know I feel a lot better when the players that I've worked with have gone on and done great things, and their great thing might be a teacher and a mom, and other ones might be CEO or a president or a professional. Everybody's success in their mind is different, but I think what we've tried to do, Justin, what you've talked about is kind of that next generation. Is we've brought on coaches that are veterans, Shelly Sheets and Yvonne Sanchez, veteran coaches that have been around and with a certain perspective, and they were willing, as I think all of us have been, to be vulnerable and talk about the things we screwed up and not be afraid of those things, and talk about how they were learning experiences. And I think that helps the younger generations of coaches that we've had on, like Kira, like Joy McCorvey. And, we've had these coaches and they're talking to us about VHS tapes, and they're like, they have no idea what the heck we're talking about. But, that's important, because I think when you look at the whole generation that we're talking about now, Justin, that you did, is that think back to a few years back and the unfortunate shooting that happened at Parkland in Florida. And how much those kids showed us. I mean, you're talking kids 13 to 17 years old showed us that, what? We have the ability to do a lot, and I'm not just talking about those specific kids. I mean, I think that as a generation of kids, they have access to so much more information than we did when we were their age. They have the ability to learn and to pick up things that we wouldn't even have thought about at their age. So to not try to work with that opportunity and give these kids the opportunity to speak and be a part of what you're doing, instead of thinking that you have to make every decision for them. I think, I think that change is a huge change, and one we should kind of push and try to make better. So there's more and more informed decisions being happening on a daily basis. And I think that's how you build improvement through all of it. But I do believe, like, what we've tried to do with our stories and our vulnerability and how we've tried to kind of pull that out of other people, I think it resonates with people because it is real, and it's not a cardboard cutout of a thought that you're supposed to have.
I love what you mentioned too, and I think outside of yourself, the rest of us are fathers, and I think you mentioned something that sometimes we don't give the younger generation enough credit, is what I heard you say. That's what I took from that. And I think that was the most stunning thing when I realized that my 3-year-old son at the time knew way more than I give a 3-year-old kid for knowing. Like, that dude's way smarter. And so that really resonated with me with just as a parenting thing. And so where I segue what you said was, I think that's maybe what we're amplifying through sport, through the pros. And there is, the young people are way smarter than maybe the generation before us gave our generation, in a way. And if it's due to more information, if it's due to more real time, things are happening faster, maybe it's due to that. But it's just, I just think that opportunity to sort of tell our stories and our guests, and being able to kind of, as I mentioned at the beginning, was just to be able to sort of be in the moment and be present and just let what was on our hearts to talk about, what was in the moment to talk about. And I think that allowed each one of us to kind of just have our varied perspective and background and situation in the moment that we're in, because we've all gone through this time and we've all carried it in a different way, because jobs, kids, different jobs, locations in this country, like all that has carried us through this time in a different way. And I think, just being energized by our IG Live shows we did with former players, and just being able to understand that if we play the long game, to Gavin's point a second ago, playing the long game, at the end of the day, you're going to win that day. And I just think that really, really, I think if I was to pull back and snapshot what we did, that would probably be my piece there. Gav, I'll throw it back to you there and just kind of
my final thoughts for this entire summer. Honestly, as weird as it may sound, grateful for these opportunities that have presented itself. Never more has what is the saying? If one door closes, another door opens, or if one door closes, open up the window. Whatever saying, cliche you want, I feel like that summer, I'm grateful for those opportunities. It's forced me to be a little more critical with my thinking as it relates to the job, with my relationships with coaches, players. It also forced me to be a little more creative with certain things. We got to do this project, which is amazing. And I'm again, so thankful for that opportunity. But last but not least, it's provided me time with my family. Like, I'd never had to go out recruiting April. I didn't have to go out in May. I didn't have to work camps in June. Not saying that I don't like doing those things. I love doing those things. I mean, I'm a people's person. I will talk to a wall if the wall looks nice. Like, I am just a talker. I think that's my Portuguese blood in me. But I will probably never get that time again to do what I was able to do this summer with you guys, with my family, just being able to dive into the personal growth and development. So again, as weird as it sounds with all the craziness going on, just a grateful, I'm thankful and grateful for the opportunity. Justin, how about you?
So to hop on a couple of your points there, as the normal work from home guy here, I'm ready for the rest of my family to get going. Kids can go back to school. I want the house empty again during the day. No, I'm kidding. The main point though, and the point that you made, and it's a conversation I had with Jesse early or mid-March. Things had shut down. Jesse and I had a conversation, and our conversation was, some people are going to take advantage of this and some people aren't. Some people are going to say this is an opportunity. Other people are going to pout and not, be mad that they are stuck at home instead of, okay, I'm stuck at home. What can I do? And Jesse and I had a really good conversation about that. And I really feel like this was an opportunity. Do I feel like I personally took advantage of it? Hit and miss. Some things that we all could do better. Self-care is one of the things that, I probably need to take more days off of work. I probably need to get out of the house a lot more than I currently am. But overall for the summer for us here as this group, the big thing is this is about the people. And that list that we kind of covered on our guests are fantastic. But there also aren't a better group of guys than the guys on this call. So I appreciate every one of you. And, I get to see Brian coming to Vegas. I get to see Gavin coming to Vegas. I get to see Jesse coming to Vegas. And then I get to see Tony at Pearl Jam concerts. And someday we're going to get back to Pearl Jam concert. And Tony, your thoughts?
Well, I want to echo that statement. I'm really proud of all of us, all you guys and myself, just of what we've been able to put together here. Because I think it has reached a lot of people. And I think, our guests have really appreciated it, because I think sometimes we've taken them down on a stroll through either memory lane or maybe some thoughts that they didn't really know that they had. And all of a sudden we kind of, sparked their interest a little bit and got them thinking a little more. So I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to stimulate thought, stimulate ideas, stimulate people to work on trying to be better. None of us are finished products. We could all be better. So I think, we try to take advantage of the time, Justin and Jesse, and not put ourselves in on the couch mode or, ignoring, opportunities to improve. So I really am proud of what we've done. I appreciate all of you guys and being, in this crew that we've set up here. And I'm just really looking forward to what we have coming next. Cause I think, we've got off to a good start here, but I think there's plenty more for us to do going forward.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I want to echo is the fact that, if there's one point that this proved to ourselves, but hopefully to others, is that, you do something, anything long enough, you're going to have a circle that will go to the ends of the earth with, And I think that is something that we all talked about. And this is our product. This is the product of our 20 years. And, you know, could there have been more people involved? Of course, you know, but, you know, it's, you know, these 5 guys that have an opportunity to tell their story, to pull stories out of others. And ultimately that's what it's about, you know, and obviously we want to thank you all for you know, bringing us into your homes, your office, your cars, anywhere that you'll have us. But look forward to more stories being told. We're going to take a couple weeks off to re-energize and recharge, but we thank you for being part of it. Until next time, from the bench.